Hello everyone. We are going to go down the sometimes daunting path of making our own pasta tonight. We're gonna do a lasagna. A few nights ago we made a marinara sauce. I added ground beef and mushrooms to a portion of it. I ended up saving that, and we're going to have that as one of the layers with some ricotta and mozzarella and Parmesan. So how do we go about making fresh pasta sheets? That is something that I definitely don't do it every day. I'm a big fan of the boxed pasta, but what the heck, right? So to make fresh pasta, we need two simple things, flour and eggs, and then just a little bit of salt for flavor. So we'll start things off. I'll bring this right down to the cutting board. So this will be where we work our pasta dough today. So I have some eggs. I have a bowl here for a little extra flour that I may need. I have an emergency cup with some water just in case I feel that I need it. And then we're going to bring over our tub of flour. So I guess one of the things we had from the restaurant that now I get to finally use. So this is cake flour. It's going to have a little bit less in protein than all-purpose flour, and it should be super fine. You can actually see it. I mean, it looks like powdered sugar. So I'm going to take about a little more than 3 cups for what I'm trying to do here. So there's 2. Here's a 3rd cup. Put it right here on the board. And then I'm going to maybe go with a little bit more here, and then I'm going to put a little bit extra in the bowl, just in case I need to dust. And that's about it. No exact science to it. You don't have to use eggs if you don't have eggs. You can use oil, you can use just flour and water. It's a little boring. The eggs give it some richness, so we'll see how this works out. So like I said, I don't usually do this. I am going to kind of go the old school method for part of it, and then I'm going to use the KitchenAid mixer for the other part of it. So I'm going to make a well here in the middle. And I'll crack my eggs into the well. You can also, if you'd like, beat your eggs separately. There's no reason you can't. A little bit of shell in here. Let's see if I can get this guy out. So this should be enough pasta for about 5-6 people, 4 eggs. I'm going to do the lasagna, and then I do have a daughter that doesn't care for lasagna, so we're going to make some butter noodles for her. And I did get a little bit of shell, so I'll be right back and grab a spoon and get the shell out of here. So let's go find our pieces of shell. Here we go. I just found it. Being a little stubborn here with me. And there we go. All right, so now we have the eggs and the flour, and so we're going to use, you can use either a fork or your fingers. Let's see, I can't find eggs anymore, all sold out. So Suzette, no problem there. Instead of using eggs, you can actually use some olive oil. The big difference when you don't use egg yolks is your pasta is not going to have that orange hue to it. It's going to be much more stark white. The other thing, it won't be quite as rich, and that's okay. So this is optional. You can either use your fingers and mix your eggs up, or you can use a fork. And then we're going to bring in slowly a little bit of flour and a little bit more as these eggs are incorporating. I'm just kind of taking away from this well that I've built so we don't get all over the board. A little bit more flour. So this is kind of that start, and you can see, and if you're a huge egg fan and have access to them, you can leave the whites out and just go egg yolks. That's no problem. You can do an egg white pasta. There is no one correct method to it. If you don't want to do this well method, you can also take all the ingredients and put it right into a KitchenAid if you have one. And with that, you can put in there's an actual pasta hook that will do a lot of this work for you. But for this, we're just going to knead this dough. So I'm going to continue to bring a little bit of flour from the well. And at this point, I'm now going to use my hands and start to collapse it. And we'll start kneading here at this point. So I'm going to get rid of any of this excess. I want to make sure that all of this egg is incorporated in with the dough. So I do have a little bit of extra flour in the bowl as we work this. My oven is now preheated to 350 because we're doing lasagna tonight. So you can see it's still a little bit floury, but there's a ton of egg left over. So I'm going to start working this a little bit more with my fingers, bringing in all this excess flour, start putting it together. As long as you don't mind a little bit of mess of flour, it's not too difficult to make pasta dough. So we're going to be working on this for probably the next 5 minutes or so. I'm going to be adding in a little bit of salt. And then as we go, I could either add more flour or some water, depending on what we're seeing. So we're almost to the point that I can actually start kneading the dough. I'm still mixing. You can see it's still kind of eggy here. Can't be afraid to get messy on this. All right, so I'm happy with, looks like all the egg is incorporated in the flour. I'm gonna put it all together and here we go, we're gonna start kneading. I'm gonna ask Susie to come over here and give me a little bit of salt so that I'm not having to go wash my hands and then come back to it. Some of this kosher salt in the little plastic quart container there. We're gonna go a pinch, like a heavy pinch. So Susie's gonna add the salt right in. Go ahead. That looks good. Thank you.
What's the red stuff on top?
Don't know. All right, so now this dough is drying out a little bit. I have water if I feel that I need it, but I'm gonna keep working it because we're trying to get it all incorporated with each other. The problem is, see how it flakes off a little bit? We want everything to be able to stick together, so you wanna try and be patient the best you can, but if you see that it's drying out too much, that's where you'll add just a smidge of water. I think the saying is if you don't sweat a little bit, you're not working hard enough doing it. So I pour a little bit of water into my hand and then I'll add it in that way rather than pouring it right onto the dough. Typical flours used in pasta are double O flour, which is very fine, a lot like this cake flour I'm using. And then semolina has a little bit more texture. And semolina is almost that, it's like really, really fine cornmeal. And a lot of places do a mixture of half semolina, half double O. For this, I just want some silky sheets for this lasagna. And that's why this cake flour is gonna work great. You can also see it's taken on the color of those egg yolks. A lot of this work could be done with a KitchenAid mixer if you have one. You'll still want to finish it by kneading. because what we're trying to do is end up with sheets that don't split apart. And so we're trying to get all of the, trying to make it stretchy. Get the gluten working in our favor. Smidge more water. Still flaking apart. We probably have a few more minutes of this. I know it's got to be really interesting watching dough being kneaded, but this is one of the big reasons I usually buy boxed pasta. Now just a little bit more flour as it's starting to stick to the board. So as you can see, the dough starts to stick just a little bit here. This is a fine time to add a little bit extra flour just to help you work it a little bit more. As I keep working this, it's getting less and less flaky. And it's wanting to stick together a lot more, which is what we're going for. Once we're done with this, we'll end up using that KitchenAid. If you don't have one with a pasta attachment, you can use a rolling pin. It's just, once again, a lot of work to get it down to the thickness that you're wanting for pasta. We're almost there. You can see it's really starting to stick together well. Very few flaky pieces left. So a lot of kneading is just putting your body weight into your palm. Your fingers are only there to kind of hold everything together. So this is starting to feel pretty solid, which is a good thing. Few little flaky pieces here. Once we get those to stop flaking, then we'll be ready to go. Add a little bit more flour to the board. Probably another minute and we'll be ready to go. We'll let part of it rest, and then what we'll do is take this lump of dough and split it into quarters and work with 1/4 of the dough at a time, so we're not overwhelming ourselves with it. Susie's laughing at me while I'm laboring over.
I'm pouring orange juice. I'm not laughing.
Oh. All right, so I think we're right about there. A couple more little pieces. So I'm gonna. So as you pour water, you're going to have to put a little bit of flour down on the board so it doesn't stick in. All right, so I think we're there. So we have our dough of pasta. Going to sprinkle the board with a little flour. Sprinkle the dough a little bit. I'm actually going to give it, it's starting to pull apart, so I'm going to give it 30 more seconds here. And that's the thing, based on the humidity in the room, based on the heat, based on how much pressure you're applying, there's no one specific time that you can give this. It kind of speaks to you and tells you when it's ready to go. And it's really what you're looking for is just kind of a solid ball with no cracks in it, or it starts to split apart. And even as you pull it apart, you can see it has just a little bit of stretchiness, and that's that texture you're going to want after it's cooked as well. All right, so as this sits here, I'm actually going to cover it with plastic wrap. That's going to help keep the humidity into it. So it'll sit here and rest for a couple of minutes while I get everything else set up. Next up, we'll be getting that KitchenAid out. I'll have to check the angle. So I have a commercial KitchenAid that was at the restaurant. I'm going to pull that out and try and fit it here into this small area. So if you haven't seen this before, you can find these. It's just the KitchenAid stand mixer. I'll show it to you. KitchenAid stand mixer here. We've taken the bowl off. You could put a pasta hook here that would do the work of what I just did. Not quite as well though, because this doesn't have a sensor, so it's a lot of it by feel. So here's the pasta attachment. I'll show this to you here. As you see the space here, that is the widest space, and I can actually turn the knob to enclose the space a little bit more. You'll see numbers on the side. Let me show this to you. So I have a knob here, so you see the number 1 there. And as I adjust it, number 2, number 4, number 6, number 8, that's the thickness of the pasta that I'm trying to make. So I'm going to start things off on number 1, probably give it 3 or 4 passes, and then we'll move from there. So I have the dough resting, probably another 2 minutes. I'm going to get something to rest the pasta on after I make these noodles, and I'll be right back. This is also a great time to make sure that you're refreshing yourself, as I'm sure Corey and Martin are doing as they're watching. How you doing, guys? Let's see if we have any questions while we're waiting for this dough to rest here. So we answered the eggs. And Suzette, yes, you may share, absolutely. All right. So hi everyone. So now like I said, so we have this guy covered in plastic wrap. I'm gonna cut it into quarters and work with a quarter at a time. I'm going to keep the remaining wrapped in the plastic so that we don't dry out too much. So here's my first quarter. See, we do have a little bit of cracking, so I'm not super stoked on it, but we'll see how it works out. So first thing I'm going to do is flatten it all out with my hands. And then I'm going to turn this KitchenAid on to the stir setting, the lowest setting. You see this underneath go, but it's also spinning the pasta roller. Not sure if you can see, but that guy's spinning right there. Bring this down just a little bit. So I'm going to still flatten it out the best I can, and obviously I don't want it to be wider than the width here. So with that in mind, I'm going to be kind of stretching it as I'm doing it. I have a little bit of flour just in case I need it to, well, I'm going to flour the board that I'm going to rest the pasta on for sure, just in case it seems to get stuck on these rollers. All right. So this is setting number 1 we're going through. So after one pass, you can see it's breaking just a little bit. Don't love it. So I'm going to fold it over, smash it down, and run it through again. All right, still a little bit of broken pieces here. It's pretty thick right now. I'm going to dust it with just a little bit of flour. Just a little bit of flour, fold it over, and do it again. All right, so now those little holes are starting to disappear, right? I don't see any on this pass at all, which is making me pretty happy. Now I'm going to fold it this way and go again. I have a nice long sheet. One more time. Without any more movement, it should go through really easily at this point. There it is. And now what I'm going to do is take it and fold it kind of diagonally like this, because I now want it to get to that width. And here's where we're going to fine tune it. So this will be my last time through on setting number 1. I'm going to go through where the two folds met and hope that it likes it. And it doesn't, so we're going to have to go through a couple more times. One more fold this way. I'm going to dust it with a little bit more flour. It is now the consistency I want, and now it's about getting the shape. So this is beautiful consistency on this pasta. So now I'm going to mold it into the shape that I'm looking for. And we're going to go through, I'm going to go through at the fattest end. Go through a second time. I'm going to use my knife to actually cut a piece off. So now we're going to be at the point that we're trying to get the shape that we're looking for the size pan we're going to use. So let's find the pan we're going to use tonight. It's a little big. We may use this cake pan. I think I'll use a Pyrex tonight. This will work out great. think I would like something deeper than this if I have one. And I do. Here we go. So Pyrex lasagna tonight. You don't always have to have the perfect thing. That's the great thing about something like this. So this is a 9 by 7 by 2.5 pan. So now we want to have these pasta sheets roughly about this size. So I have the idea, the visual of where I'm trying to get to. And here we go. All right, so there we are, setting 1. Now I'm going to go and make it a little bit thinner. We're going to go to setting 2. As that happens, the pasta is going to stretch out. We're going to end up cutting these noodles. So here's where we are. I am going to dust it with flour so it doesn't stick to the rollers. Two times through at number 2. Now we're getting there. So now we're going to go to number 3. For lasagna noodles, I'll probably end up at number 4 or 5. I don't want them super, super thin. I'm definitely liking how this is looking though. So you can see it's getting to that thickness that we're looking for. So that was number 3. We're here at number 4. I'm going to put just a little more sprinkle of flour on here. So we did a whole ton of passes at number 1 to get it to stay together. A couple at number 2, and then just 1 at number 3, 1 at number 4. And we're getting really long pasta sheets now. And I think at this point, I am going to go to number 5. And this will be the last pass I make, most likely. All right, so there's our sheet of pasta. Look at that guy. So I'm going to cut it to the size of the pan. The great thing with lasagna, definitely not a, doesn't have to be perfect. Everything's going to end up overlapping as it is. So I have a little bit of extra here. Let me show you what I've done. I've cut big sheets here. I'm not going to boil them because it's going to cook in. Everything's going to cook in with the liquid that's going to come naturally in the lasagna. So these sheets are here. I'm going to set them just off to the side. They're going to dry just a little bit. And then I'm going to work on the next quarter. So we're going to go back to 1. I'm going to smash this down and work it by hand. So remember, if you have a cutting board, you'll still want to do the same thing and not have that entire lump of dough that you're working with. It's just too much, too daunting. But make sure that the rest of the dough that's resting is covered with plastic wrap like this, just to keep that humidity in there. So I'm trying to stretch it out. To get to a thickness that'll go through at number 1. I think I'm right there. So remember, just like the last time, we're going to have all this breaking going on. It's breaking pretty severely here. And that's fine. This is that first initial pass. And so I'm taking these broken pieces, I'm going to smash them back together. There it goes. The thickest end is going to go in first. We're going to go through pass 2. This is setting number 1. So it's the widest setting I have. Still have some holes here. So we're going to fold it over and go again. Aha! Look at that. No holes. Oh, sorry, one little guy right there. So let's do it again. All right, now I'm happy with that. Setting 1, one last pass through. Setting 2, it's a little bit thinner. We're gonna do a couple passes through on setting 2. I'm gonna dust it with flour because I'm feeling like it's just barely starting to stick. If you're just joining us, we started this with just 4 eggs, with a little bit more than 3 cups of cake flour for this one, a little bit of salt, and a touch of water that I just added in when I felt it was necessary. I'm going to attachment number 3, setting number 3 now. We needed the dough for maybe 7-8 minutes. It's now working through the pasta attachment. That was setting 4, and here's setting 5, and this will be the last one. Pretty amazing that just some flour and some eggs can create something looking like this. So I can do all sorts of different pasta applications with this. If I wanted to do a hand-cut pasta, no problem. This KitchenAid does have attachments for me to be able to do fettuccine or spaghetti as well. If I was doing something like tortellini, I probably wouldn't use anything more than 1 because that's where you want a thicker dough. But I mean, this here at setting 5 is, let's see if I can show you the right angle, pretty darn thin. Pretty happy with it. So now we're on to the 3rd quarter. So I think I have the dough that I'm gonna need down here for the lasagna already. That's probably all I'll use. But now I have my daughter that doesn't like lasagna, or so she says, because she doesn't believe in my cooking. I don't know what it is. She's hitting me right now. So I'm gonna flatten this once again. I'm gonna set us back to number 1. So we're flattening this first part of the dough by hand. Just flat enough to pass through the pasta maker, the pasta roller, at this number 1 setting. So probably right about here. So just like the other times, we're gonna have some breaking. It's gonna come apart. I'm gonna actually help it through this time. No problem. You just put it right back. That's the great part. You think, oh no, what's happened? Look at this. Well, you'll see. In just a minute, we'll have gorgeous sheets. Another pass through at number 1. We still have all this breaking here. We're going to fold it back over and try again. If you're doing this with a rolling pin, you're really going to need to pay attention that you have consistency in your thickness. Now we're starting to look a little bit better. I'm going to do it one more time though. So I'm feeling it getting a little bit sticky. I'm going to dust this with flour. And I'm not going to move to setting number 2 until these holes stop, because what I want is when we get to setting 2 is to have a consistent sheet going without any little Swiss cheese. So run it through one more time here. Probably just fold these edges in. All right, so we're on setting 1. We're going to put it back through again. And other than the time-consuming part, this really isn't super labor-intensive. I'm not struggling at all with any of this. This is all just kind of working on its own. I still have a little bit right here, so I'm going to fold it one last time, run it through, and this will be the last time most likely at number 1, and then we'll go to the number 2 setting next. All right, so there we go, number 1. There's our dough, and we'll go to number 2. This one passed through with ease. I like it, so we'll do one more time at number 2 before we go to number 3. Number 3. Some folks call for resting the dough for an hour or so. I don't think it's completely necessary, especially when I'm using cake flour, because I don't need anything to happen. Not like you would have with a pizza dough or a bread that you're making where you need it to rise or to proof. We're just really looking for it to want to stay together. So this was number 4, and now we're turning this into a pretty long sheet. Let me see if I can show you. So now number 5, and this will be our last. Oh, I'm still on number 4, so I'll give it this pass at number 4, and then we'll go to number 5. So there's number 4, and here's the last pass at number 5. Gotta get this tip in. There we go. And this is looking really good. It's has a vibrant yellow color. It's sticking together really well. If I was to cook this in boiling water, like for noodles, let me turn this guy off here. I'm not going to work with that last quarter right now. If I was to cook this in water, it would probably be about 90 seconds, and this would get to that perfect al dente. But it's great as it is right now. So this last piece I just fabricated, I'm going to cut off one part as a lasagna noodle, just in case. And then the rest of it, let me move this KitchenAid out of the way here. The rest of it, I'm going to slice into kind of these coarse pieces. So I'll probably do, let's see, yeah, that's probably a good length. If you want long, short noodles, this is totally up to you. So I'm gonna cut this in half, rest them on top of each other. If you feel that they're sticky, you can always dust it with a little bit of flour to keep them from sticking to each other, no problem. And then you can just make hand-cut noodles like this. So this is the length of noodle I chose and the width. So it's a little bit wider than a fettuccine noodle. And I think this will just be great with boiled with a little salt water and with some butter and cheese, and that will make my 13-year-old happy. And here's the other thing I can do. So there's nothing saying that I can't stack it on each other. There's that guy, and last one. Oh, this one is starting to rip. All right, so what happens here, this is actually a great thing that this happened. So when it starts to rip, you can either just toss it or you can go as is. The other thing you can do is smash it onto each other and then flatten it. I'm going to choose to toss it because I have plenty of dough that's made. All right, so here are my noodles. They can actually sit here and dry for the next 15, 20, 30 minutes. It really doesn't matter. The other thing I'm going to check, it looks like these two guys stuck together, so I'm going to peel them apart before they go into the water. I've had another one that stuck together. All right, so we'll move on to the layer of lasagna. So remember, we made that marinara sauce the other night. Have our Pyrex here. I tried to cut it roughly the shape of the Pyrex, but I made it a little bit bigger just in case. We're gonna start things off. I've saved that meat sauce. I'm not going to warm it. I'm gonna put it in cold. That'll be one component. I'm going to take some ricotta cheese, mix it with an egg, and that'll be another component of the dish. I'll probably do some plain marinara as well, and then I'll have some mozzarella cheese on top. So these layers will all go in. It will go in the oven at 350. It only takes about 25 minutes or so because this is fresh pasta. I'm not going to cook the pasta before because the sauce is actually going to cook it for me. So the ricotta is going in the bowl as well as an egg. And for this, I'm going to use dried parsley instead of fresh. It'll end up blooming in the mixture cheese. Just trying to mix it in, and then we'll start layering and get it going in the oven. I'm going to add a little bit more parsley. Okay, so we have our mixture of ricotta, egg, and parsley. That's going to be one of the layers of this. You always want to start with liquid on the bottom, otherwise the dough will stick to the pan. So I'm going to be right back here. it's time to build. So we have some marinara. And Jessica, yes, you can use basically anything you want, but the marinara from the other night would be the perfect base to this. So if you have that, that's great. You're gonna layer the bottom of the pan with it. You're gonna put in a sheet. At this point, you're gonna see that the sheet is just a little bit bigger, so I'm gonna use the knife on the inside. Probably gonna get a paring knife here that's gonna be easier to work with. And I'm going to cut it. And then I see that I have just a little bit of overlap, so I'm going to cut myself another slice of pasta that's going to go over that overlap. So you can layer in any order you want. I'm going to go ricotta next. So I'm using a fork and a spoon to spread it pretty evenly. The one thing that you can do here that I don't have a problem with, I probably encourage it, is to add a sprinkle of salt onto this ricotta. And no problem if like you see some of the marinara coming up from below, because all those flavors you are gonna end up melding together anyway. So there's that layer. There's a little bit of salt. Another sheet. So I'm going to pre-cut this one since I know that they're a little bit too big. I'll lay right in there. Actually, still can cut it even more. And then the other good part about fresh pasta as opposed to the box stuff is I can now form this to whatever shape I want really easily by just slicing it and even ripping it. Now I'm going to put in a layer of this meat and mushroom sauce. I'm going to make this probably the thickest layer of lasagna. This is all that protein layer. We have some of this organic Parmesan stuff that I'm going to sprinkle on directly onto this meat layer. And you can really kind of go in whatever direction you want. Here comes another layer. Eyeballing that I need to cut it. Another layer of ricotta. The egg is important to hold it all together. That's why it's in there. Not the most glamorous thing making lasagna, but the great thing about it is you can do this the day before, you can do it in the morning, and then you just put it in the oven when you're ready to go, and about 25-30 minutes it'll be done. All right, I'm happy with that layer. Let's go another layer of pasta. And this is one I'm kind of piecing together here, and that's no problem either. And let's do a layer of marinara again. You know what? Let's make it medium. Put a little extra the meat sauce in there. And I think we're gonna go one last layer of pasta and then a little bit more cheese and we'll be done and ready to go in the oven. Some ricotta I'm gonna put on top. And on this top layer, I'm going to do ricotta, Parmesan, and mozzarella. I just want to make sure there's a component touching every single noodle though, so the noodles don't dry out. So there's that. Here goes the Parmesan. This will be a little more generous. And then I went and bought pre-shredded mozzarella because why not? See if I can get this guy open. I'll be generous with the mozzarella on top. I'm going to cover this with some foil. It's going to go into the oven for about 25 minutes covered, and then the last little bit I'm going to uncover it so I get the cheese brown, and at that point I may sprinkle some fresh parsley on it. And that's about it. So let's get that covered in the oven. Oven's already preheated to 350. It's going in. The nice thing is I now have about 25 minutes to clean up the big mess I made of flour and everything in the kitchen. So we'll see you back here in 25 minutes. I'll pull the cover off. I'll make a Caesar dressing and we'll finish up.